This is, this is a wonderful time to just take a breath. Say, what do we do when things go wrong? How much do we panic? What do we do? What's our support system? And sometimes that support system is on the outside, and sometimes that support system is on the inside. And these are just some prompt questions that if you haven't really thought about what you do or what you can do, that these are questions to start with for just listing out. Sometimes I keep a list near me because when I'm overwhelmed, it's hard to think clearly. And I know like one or two people that I can just go to, and that this list will help me if I sometimes don't even know that I am struggling. When you're so stressed out that you feel like your brain is moving faster than you can catch up with, that's a good signal that you might need to just take a breath and take a step back and give yourself a moment. And I also kind of lost my train of thought because of all of this stuff. So I'm
Take
gonna
your
move on.
time. We are farmers.
We are. And you know what is so crazy about our job is my next slide does talk about suicide. And if that's a lot for you, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. But the reality is the suicide rate for farmers is the sixth in the nation by occupation. And that's generally the only information that's being talked about nationally or locally about how we're doing. There's no other data about us as far as our health, our well-being, how we're feeling, how our jobs are going. All we have is a suicide rate, and unfortunately, it's that high that I feel like this right now is very urgent. And it's kind of a triage thing that we should be doing as much as we can for ourselves now and for those around us now, because it's already really late for us to start. And a lot of that I think has to do with the historical culture around agriculture, that rest and care has not been part of what this job has been about. In 2014 was the last time we had data from the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. They're the ones that put out the OSHA standards and make those charts for all of our chemicals and things that will be, if you've ever worked in food service or, the OSHA is basically the national monitoring of occupational health. And they used to do a farm injury and health survey that the last data we had was 2014. I started presenting on this in 2018, and this data was it was new enough to be useful in these presentations. But at this point, it's so old, it's 10 years old, that I still keep it in my presentations just to make the point that nobody's doing this anymore. And that's all the more reason why I was just in DC with the National Farmers Union lobbying about the Farm Bill. And I focused specifically on our stress and well-being. And I told every representative that I talked to that whatever this new farm and ranch stress assistance network they're trying to come up with could be, would be the only one we have, because NIOSH, National Institute of Safety and Health, doesn't seem to want to watch what we're doing anymore and know about our injuries. And I have the sprains and strains kind of out on the end here because that's the department that I work in with massage. Soft tissue injuries are a huge part of our injuries. If you do look at the data here, even though it's 10 years old, the only higher amount is in other. And other includes a ton of other things. I mean, how many times have I punctured or scratched myself? I don't even want to think about it. Burns, you know, the ability to address our soft tissue injuries is something we can do ourselves, even if we don't have access to a massage therapist or a personal trainer or an occupational therapist. There are some tools and tricks that I'm going to share with you tonight about ways that you can address your own pain and injuries. And hopefully that can help us keep working and keep feeling good, because I know in the work that I've done with people with chronic pain, a lot of times if you have the kind of pain that doesn't let up, that is what leads you down the road that could lead to taking your own life. That amount of pain is too much to bear sometimes. And if we can be proactive about it ahead of time and try to do our best to support ourselves before it gets that bad, I think that we'll be farming longer and we'll have more cool farmers out there because we don't want miserable, grumpy farmers. Like, I work at the farmer's market. I love talking to people, but when I'm in pain, I'm a lot less likely to enjoy talking to you about my vegetables. I just want to go home. So, the best we can do for ourselves is as little as whatever's accessible. And I'm hopeful that I can make some things accessible to you now. So the nervous system is the primary piece that's working between our mind and our body. There's a woman that I present with in other spaces that she says, mind and body connection doesn't exist because they're the same thing. And that's true. Our mind is our body lives in our mind, and our nervous system is kind of that super highway that connects all of our body parts to our brain. And that's how stress gets transmitted. That's how messages of pain get transmitted. And they're important to hear. It's important to hear your messages of pain because they're messages about what you need. But in the sympathetic division, which is where we have our fight, flight, freeze, that's our survival, our kind of our feral animal brain, I think of sometimes. Like if you were trying to get a wild animal to trust you, you couldn't really yell at it to trust you. So if you're in this space where you're struggling and you're feeling like you're kind of floating because you're so stressed out, there's no amount of shaming yourself and yelling at yourself to calm the hell down that will make you calm down. What you need is to remove yourself from stimuli. You need quiet, you need oxygen, airways constricting during our or during our sympathetic division. Sympathetic is what relaxes us. You can see that your digestion is working when you have your parasympathetic, you're resting and restoring in your body activated. People with chronic stress often have digestive issues, and that's due to the response of the nervous system. So the pieces of your body that need to work, like your digestion and your reproductive system, they need this time of rest to function. And if you're one of those people who feels like aren't you aren't doing enough, I want to encourage you that you could think of yourself doing digestion, recovery, rebuilding when you're taking time to rest. So the nervous system is kind of, if you're interested in learning more about it, it's very complex, but ultimately, this is the simple summary of the nervous system that we're working with. And our body is always trying to heal itself. The nervous system makes adjustments so that it can do whatever we need it to do. And it's our job to be in partnership with our bodies and not act like we're oppressors of our bodies. We need to think of them as the messages are useful, they're not an inconvenience. And that can be really hard when you have to pee in the middle of harvest. Like, this is an inconvenience, but what am I going to do about it? Can you adjust the way that you plan your day? Sometimes you can't. But if you can cultivate the awareness and understand how to respond to the messages, this is where it's your responsibility to know what your capacity is, what amount of control you have over your schedule. I talk to a lot of farm owners, and sometimes farm workers don't have as many choices as farm owners do. When you're a farm worker, you are out there harvesting until they tell you you can take a break. And there's always room for advocating for yourself. And I think when you know more about this stuff, you could maybe even talk to your boss about it and say, we may need to make more space for breaks or make requests. Like, I want to encourage you to stand up for your body sometimes if you can. I know that that's not easy all the time, but there's got to be some changes in the way we do our jobs. And I'm not here to lecture you about that. I'm just here to empower you and encourage you that to rebuild your tissue, you need water and food. We work our bodies so hard, we break down our tissue, we break down the muscles, and that's how they rebuild. But if you never give them a chance to rest and rebuild themselves, then you're just going to keep increasing the weakness that you have. So not taking a rest sometimes is the attitude of your boss, and I would encourage you to maybe challenge that sometimes if you're able. I totally understand that that's not always the case, but there's always somewhere to start with yourself. If you bring extra water with you, if I would always bring, I had a boss when I was first starting farming that was just so resistant to rest. She just wanted to keep going and going. She was a single woman running a farm. I was her only employee. I was new to farming. I know the stress that she was under. And I would just stuff granola bars in my pockets. And I would bring the biggest water bottle I had. And I was like, well, I'm going to have to sneak food then because she's not going to let me take a break. And I just have to figure it out for myself. And I know that that kind of sucks, but that's just how it is for us, that our job is really hard to work in rest. And that's why nobody's really talked about it yet. And we got to try because we're not going to keep going like we are. At the beginning of the meeting, we were talking about regeneration, and you're absolutely right that regeneration absolutely needs to extend to us. And if you're into permaculture, I know that there are some principles of permaculture that include the individual, which I think is awesome, but a lot of other ways of farming haven't really brought us into the equation yet. So if you can bring yourself into the equation, I encourage you to just increase your water, make sure you have food when you need it, and then cultivate a relationship with your body, whatever that means, whether you're learning how to notice the signals. When I worked in retail, I was proud of myself that I didn't need to take a bathroom break until my shift was over. But I had tuned out the signals so well that, of course, I needed to take a bathroom break. I just didn't realize that I needed to take a bathroom break. So I thought I was so cool for being so numb. And it's just silly. Like, it's just silly. So, whatever you can do, seek good rest, feel into your body, whatever that means for you. Now, in the morning, I try to connect with my body before I do anything else. I just try to notice what's going on. And as much as I have resented the chronic pain that I live with, it's become a friend that I know I can check in with the areas of pain and say, how are you doing today? What's going on? And that's my initial check-in of the day. So you are super important, and I hope that you'll take time for yourself. Supporting our bodies, again, it's about cultivating awareness, having an attitude of cooperation, and taking responsibility will get you really far. And knowing some stuff that I'm about to go in to sharing with you now. These are the joints, the major joints of your body, and this is what they would prefer. Your ankle needs a lot of mobility. Your knee needs some stability. And I encourage people, as you're exploring your body or trying to figure out what level of function you have, to start from the ground up. And that totally makes sense to those of us that work with the earth. And your ankles are such an important part of your strength and your ability to move that if you don't know where to start with your ankles. I was in the marching band in high school and they had us do the alphabet with our feet. You draw the alphabet with your feet and just see how that goes. Some directions are harder than others. And if you notice that you have some directions that are harder than others, it makes sense that you might encourage yourself to try doing that more. And that's why I talk so much about taking responsibility, because I can't tell you how to do your body. You have a farm that's different from mine, you have a life that's different from mine, but some of these just kind of universal knowledge pieces about the body, you can do what you need to do with that. So if your ankle isn't very mobile and it's real stiff, your knee is going to increase its mobility to make up for the lack of mobility in your ankle. And that's when people will start having injuries to the knee. because their knee's moving around more than it should because the ankle doesn't have the mobility to support the knee. So all the way up your body, these alternating mobility and stability relationships are also checking themselves against each other, kind of like your nervous system is checking on your organs, that if one of them's not functioning well, the other ones are going to come and try to help them out, just like we do with our communities. Your body's a community. So I have hip trouble. That's my kind of lifelong thing. And I have a lot of stability in my hip because it doesn't have the mobility that it needs. So my lumbar spine and my knees sometimes act up. So you could even use this as a way of narrowing down what might be bothering you based on what the issue is. Let's say you have a really stiff shoulder. Well, if your thoracic spine and your shoulder area doesn't have mobility, then what's going on with your neck? What is going on with your low back? And those are the kind of things that you can feel into and explore for yourself. And using these, just encourage more mobility in the shoulder. Just give yourself some moving around. I have some self-massage I'm going to teach you about tonight. And that can also add some mobility to areas that are just too locked up. And because of these interrelationships between your joints, it's really important that we are aligned when we're working. And that is so not possible all the time with farming. But I would encourage you to try to alternate when you can. Like, I think of weeding as a pretty low stakes activity. Sometimes I will weed twice as fast with my right hand. And then after a while, if my arm gets tired, I'll try to weed as much as I can with my left. My left will get tired faster because I don't use it as much, but it's kind of balancing out that effort between the right and left sides. And you can see that up, your shoulders, your hips, your knees, and your ankles, they all work as a team. We always lead with one side more than the other. So anything you can do to lead with the other side, even if you're walking up the stairs, noticing which leg you start with all the time. There's just tiny ways that you can check in with your body and check in with your alignment. And when you are moving around, try to imagine these spots and how aligned they are. Because if you were to pick up a bucket with just your finger, you'd probably injure yourself pretty quickly. You're only using a few small joints to do that lift. But even the difference between one finger and your whole hand, there's a lot more going on in your hand, many more joints, many more muscles to support that action. So when I try to give people a really easy, just something to keep in your brain, use as many joints as possible. If you're lifting and you're only using your arms, if you're using your hips, your knees, and your legs, you're using more joints to carry that load. And on my next slide, I've got two methods for lifting crates, because that's one of the only things I can think of that's pretty common for any of us, vegetable growers, livestock raisers, anything we do. We're always lifting a crate of something at some point. And that there's a couple different ways to do it. There's never one specific way you have to do it. I'll use the one knee when I have a lighter load. It uses more of your arm strength, and you can alternate knees. So sometimes my knees get sore and maybe I don't want to lift with my left knee today. So I'll lift with my right knee. That when you're checking in with what's going well, you can adjust your single knee lift to whatever knee is the strongest today. And that one will probably get tired. Maybe you switch it up a little later. And the squat method is great for really heavy loads, again, because it's using all your joints. You can see the ankles, the knees, the hips, the shoulders, everybody's working together to lift this load with you. So that's another way that you can just easily, without anybody's permission, just try to like work with your body throughout the day, however it works for you. And another really important one to me is self-massage. I think a lot about athletes. Cynthia Flores is in Maine, I think. She has a company called Labor Movement, and she does a lot of online trainings for farmers around ergonomics and how to move well. And her kind of tagline is athletes in overalls. And we really are. We're working at that level every day. And the thing about athletes is they always invest in their recovery. They've got massage therapists, they've got personal trainers, they've got personal chefs, they've got ice baths. Like, they don't shy away from investing in their recovery because they perform at such a high level all the time. And we're the same. If anything, we're performing at a high level day after day after day. Some of them have off days. You have, baseball players do 3 to 5 games and then they have a couple of off days. We don't really get off days. If as a vegetable grower, July, I'm not really sure that I'm going to get a lot of off days. I encourage you to find the off time that you can. And when you have concerted effort to your rest, you are multiplying the benefit of that rest. I've heard anecdotally, there's no real science behind this, but that 1 hour of intentional recovery, like self-massage or cryotherapy, heat and cold, doing intentional recovery techniques can give you 24 to 48, which sounds maybe like a stretch. I'm going to go with 24 hours of passive rest, which is just like laying on the couch scrolling on your phone. That it's great to have that time, especially for your brain to just reset and have a nothing time of day. But if you're actively working on your recovery, accelerating your ability to bounce back. So self-massage is a really great way to re-break those muscle fibers that we break with exertion and allow them to reset. And the way that the muscles work is that, these little fibers kind of weave together to make your muscle tissue. And when we exert ourselves, we kind of pull them apart from each other. So these tiny little tears happen. And that's why you'll get sore if you don't stretch, because some of those fluids like lactic acid and some other acids that just live in your muscle tissue, they just get released. And if they don't have anywhere to go, they just stagnate and they sit there and they're outside of your tissue. And so you can feel them. So stretching resets those tissues. They're more like fibers that make up the tissue. So you're stretching them out, you're giving them this space to then realign. And self-massage is a great way to do that. I encourage everyone to use a tool. If you forget everything I've said about massaging yourself, do not use your own hands to massage yourself. I know it sounds crazy, but it's that dang nervous system again. You have more nerves in your hands than you do in your muscles. So your brain is going to hear the loudest message more than the quiet message. It can only get one message at a time. So if I'm going to massage my arm with my hand, my brain is hearing arm, 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 because my hand is sending the message about my arm. But if I'm using a tool, which I have a pen right here. Sometimes if you have a little trigger point or something that's bugging you, just like sticking something into it can feel really good. And you might feel like you want to move your arm around when you're sticking your tool into a knot. And I encourage you, this is a great way to build that relationship with your body. Whatever feels right is what your body needs. And I think that's what's so cool about massage, is that it's a subtle message that you just kind of know what your body wants once you start interacting with it. But I really, really encourage you to use a tool, because you will definitely cause damage or bruise yourself if you decide to use your hand to massage yourself. In my massage practice, I argue with people all the time. I'll find their little finger-shaped bruises on the spots that hurt them, and I'll say, have you been using your tools or your hands? And I always know when they're lying, because you will definitely cause some damage for yourself. So use a tool. You can use anything. The next slide, I'll have some examples, but a remote control, a pen, I've used all kinds of stuff. The corner of a building, you want to dig it into your shoulder a little bit. Anything that's not your hand is great. While you're giving yourself massage, breathe deeply. You need oxygen to regenerate your tissue. So breathing is an important job. It's not just an afterthought. It's an important part of the process. And then stretching after, like I explained, when you break down the muscle tissue, you just need to let it stretch out and reset so then it can come back. And this rest part of muscle building is the most important part. You can lift and lift and lift, and eventually, if your muscles never rest, they won't be able to lift anymore. So this rest time is so important to building strength. You will be stronger because you've rested, I promise. And other things to keep in mind is that you can start in a general area and then work towards a specific spot. And these are mostly about your circulation, because when you are massaging yourself, you're manipulating circulation, and that helps with healing. That's what we're doing. And I'm going to talk a little bit, I think, about heat and cold. I think this is where I'm going to talk about heat and cold too. But it's a way to work with your circulation to bring the resources that your body needs for recovery. So starting in a general area will just help the circulation not get stagnated, especially like my forearms will really hurt. If you really just dig into your forearms and you don't give the opportunity for that fluid to go back into your torso, you might have some swelling, and you may notice that, like, wow, I massaged that and it got all swollen. That you want to encourage your fluids to go to the area and then to go back to your heart to recirculate through your body. That's where everything regenerates, is here in your torso. That's where the oxygen comes, it goes with your blood in your heart, and that's where all the magic happens. So pushing towards the torso instead of away, especially if you're working on areas that are farther away from your torso. Just think about the flow of the liquid going back to your body. So you can definitely push away if you're really working into something, but I'll always kind of just give it a little bit of a extra push back towards the torso after doing the massage. And this is me just giving you away all the secrets. You don't have to spend all that money on going to the Soma Institute. Um, and then drinking extra water after. This is a lot of your body is made up of water, and we're moving around circulation, we're moving around lymph, and that's all mostly water. So replenishing that water with something fresh after you've kind of moved it all around will really help the stiffness. You'll experience a lot of stiffness if you do some massage without rehydrating after. And even after working, maybe you can't give yourself a self massage after work, but if you can give yourself an extra glass of water, that's great. There's so many degrees of success that we can enjoy, that even just doing a little bit for ourselves as far as rehydrating or stretching, just like a little bit is still better than nothing. So don't give up. I don't know if you've heard about, oh, look, massage tools and then heat and cold. I knew I had this in here. I didn't write it down. Sorry. But these are some of the tools that you can use. And sometimes I look at them and I just find something that's similar to it. Like the guy with the orange thing on his leg, I have used a rolling pin instead of one of those. Just as good. Totally great. Sometimes they have those little cookie rolling pins that have cute little designs on them. That works great. Like the little nubbins. You don't have to buy something special. It's fine. Therapy balls. I love lacrosse balls. If I had a bunch of money, I'd buy a whole case and send them to everybody that comes to my talks, because lacrosse balls are hard and they're small and you can get them just about anywhere. But if you have a sporting goods store near you, you can get some lacrosse balls. And those are awesome. You can buy the spiky balls too. Those do a little bit more for fascia. They'll kind of get into some of the other tissues that are there. But if you just have a hard ball, tennis balls work great too. You just can't lay on them because they kind of flatten out. And so if you have a wall and you just want to do your arms and your shoulders, a tennis ball would be great for something like that. And heat and cold are pretty accessible and pretty affordable. You could get, maybe you have a hot water bottle, or you might have an electric heating pad. But the best kind of super fast summary of the heat and the cold is that heat promotes the circulation and draws all those fluids to the area, and the cold will decrease the circulation in the area, so it'll push everything away. So if you have an acute injury, if you just injured yourself, they'll tell you that RICE, rest, ice, compress, elevate. That's because your body received the signal of the injury and it's rushing all of these resources to the area to heal. And sometimes the body isn't gauging how many resources it's sending. It's just saying, all hands on deck, let's go. And swelling up can even be a problem. So to keep the swelling from happening, you can give yourself some ice, and that will just kind of balance out the response from your body, and you won't have as much swelling and limitation. And Sometimes things like compartment syndrome can happen, but that's like a more serious example of if you have an injury to soft tissue that it'll just get so swollen that everything just locks up. It's like becomes this big balloon of fluid. So that's part of why cold is best when you first have an injury. But I personally love heat. And if I'm aching, if something's sore, I always go to heat because it's usually something that's been around for a while. It's probably a muscle that might be a little underhydrated, that's a little achy. So bringing that circulation there and then increasing my hydration with some water will usually ease that pain. And I kind of have a habit of just laying on a hot pack every day after work. I go along my spine and they say on the label not to lay on it, but use your best judgment. I'll lay on it for a little while and then do a little stretch, and it's maybe 20 minutes, but my hips would not function very long if I didn't do a little bit of something every day to keep them from totally locking down on me. So hot packs and cold packs, they even sell packs that you could do both with. You can put them in the freezer, you can microwave them. And so if you wanted to buy just one, I know it's hard to take care of ourselves and it can be costly. When you think about the cost of a massage or you think about the cost of the doctor's office, like I really want us all to feel like we can do this stuff for free as much as we can so that it is consistent. Because doing a little bit often is so much better than doing a lot infrequently. So don't worry if you don't feel like it's enough. I promise it is. And Tricia Hersey wrote an incredible book called Rest is Resistance. If you haven't heard of it, if you haven't read it, I definitely encourage you to check it out. She is really good at articulating all the layers of what rest means for us socially and as humans. But just seeking deep rest, whatever that means for you. It might be cuddling your animals, it might be listening to music, it might be closing your eyes, but there are no words to explain what that deep, tender rest feels like, Tricia says, and it must be practiced daily until it becomes our foundation. And I think that's so important for us as farmers because we do so much and we do it every day that to develop a rest practice really is an important foundation for us to stay functional and keep farming. So we have so many cool people entering farming that it's not going to look like it looked 50 years ago. And I would like that to continue. And I want us all to be well while we do it. I want farming to be better than it's ever been from now on. And in her book, Tricia lists some things. These are some of my favorites. She wrote even more examples, but I've definitely done some of these timing. I love that she writes a timed nap because sometimes I'll set a timer for 11 minutes and be like, I've got 11 minutes, but then I can really rest. I'm not looking at the clock like, okay, I've got 4 more minutes. Okay, 2 more minutes. Like set a timer, check out, and then come back when it's time. Taking a bath, walking in nature. We're in nature, and sometimes it's hard to remember how restorative it can be to be in nature because we look around and we see all these tasks that we have to do in our habitat, whatever we're doing there. We're in nature, but oftentimes you can maybe look at the sky while you're harvesting and take yourself a moment. I remember when I would really hate the day, I would think, I used to be in an office and this is okay. Like I see an eagle flying over me. I'm really having a tough day, but at least I'm not in an office. So any of these things or finding something that resonates with you are great ways to incorporate rest, just little bits, and then you might get hooked on it and do little bigger bits and then do more and more. Who knows? But it's all up to you. It's your life. And there are more books than just Rest is Resistance. I actually have one right here that I haven't read yet, but it's called The Embodied Path, and it's about healing, telling the story of your body for healing and wholeness, to get to know your body a little bit better. So I don't know if you can see me on the screen, if you can only see my slides, but this seems like an interesting one. I haven't checked it out fully yet, but these are some other ones that I have loved and have really informed the way that I do my work. The Body's Not an Apology is a very short one. Sonia Renee Taylor's amazing spoken word artist. So the beauty of her language is I mean, I can't even explain to you how beautifully written that book is. And it really will bring something up for you to say, maybe my body is okay just being here as it is, which I really appreciate from her. Gabor Mate is someone people probably might be familiar with. He deals a lot with trauma, and that's a lot about the body and how trauma shows up, and how to keep house while drowning. She's also got a podcast that's pretty fun to listen to if you're more into listening than reading. Um, and What My Bones Know is, again, kind of a trauma slash body, but it's a memoir about someone who went through it for herself, which I think is nice. And some others, The Hidden Messages in Water is a really interesting one with pictures about some experiments that were done with just speaking nicely or speaking meanly to water. And there's a lot of other layers there, but I think that's the one that sticks out for me the most, is that just the way you talk to things has an energetic component, and the way we talk to ourselves matters. So that helped me try to be kinder to myself on the daily. So Dr. Nicole LaPera, these are all people you may have heard of, but um, healing from our past, recognizing patterns, a lot of it has to do with our bodies. And Waking the Tiger is another one that's very body centric, and the body keeps the score. These are a lot of, trauma related, but it never hurts to explore. I didn't think that I had trauma, even though it seems silly to say that after sharing my story with you. But it took some exploration. It took some time and reflection for me to really understand why the way I was living and the way I was thinking was affected by trauma. So I think that's worth sharing. And if you're interested, check out those books. I'm sure we'll be able to share these slides with you if you want to see more. But and this is just a little reflection for you and some questions that help me ground myself and help me um, just check in. And I've used it in a few of my support groups that I have a list of resources if you want them. I know the Ag Solidarity Network is an online social network where we have a wellness group that will kind of interact online sometimes. And the Midwest Vegetable Growers, if y'all are vegetable growers, there's a quarterly support group that I facilitate just to talk about mental health and talk about what's going on with us. And if you're not a member of MVeg, they're really awesome. And I can share some links in the chat for those guys. And if you want to learn more about the characteristics of white supremacy culture that do affect the work that we do and the way that we think about ourselves, whitesupremacyculture.info is another link that I have that I feel like for me, I think a lot about how I think that my livelihood is somehow kind of stretching between the pace of our economy and the pace of Earth's healing. And they're very opposite. It takes a long time for the Earth to regenerate. And our economy wants everything yesterday, already done. So somehow in between, we're trying to make a living, we're trying to survive, we're trying to have lives. And it can just be stressful just to be in this space in between stewarding the land and trying to make a living. So whatever we can do to support ourselves is awesome. And that's all I have for you today. I'm really grateful to talk with you and be with you. And I know we're almost at the end, but if folks want to share or ask questions, I don't know. I'm here.
Woohoo. Thank you so much, Laura. And thank you everybody for making the jump from one Zoom to the other. Um, we are getting close to 8:30. I was actually going to read from Rest is Resistance. I've been working my way through it, and it's really hard as a person whose dad is a Marine, and my papa is an entrepreneur. I am realizing how much the grind culture is embedded in me. And so it's really hard, but I'm trying to deconstruct. But I thought that maybe we could all like close our eyes, and I'm gonna read this little meditation from it. And then Ben's going to share what we're up to in 2024. And then if people want to stay on and ask questions, we can do that. But yeah, if everybody wants to just close their eyes and take a deep breath. And yeah, let everything that all of the great stuff that Laura just said sink in. And yeah, this is from Rest is Resistance by Trisha Hersey. The doors of the nap temple are open. Won't you come? This is an invitation for weary souls to rest. This is a resistance. This is a protest. This is a counter narrative to the lie that we all aren't doing enough. We are enough. This is a counter narrative to the lie that our worth is tied to the grind of capitalism and the lie of white supremacy. You are enough simply by being alive. Thank you for living. Thank you for resisting. Thank you for creating. Thank you for dreaming. Thank you for resting. We believe that our healing can visit us while we are napping, while we are resting, while we are sleeping, while we are slowing down. We believe that naps provide a dream and visioning space to invent, to create, to heal, to imagine. This is what resistance looks like. Won't you come? This is a resistance. This is a protest. Thank you all.
Much for reading that. So love it.
Yeah, that was so beautiful, Jeannie. Thank you. Such a perfect way of closing out what was a really wonderful presentation, Laura. And yeah, thank you so much. I know just for myself, so much of what you said resonates in ways that mostly ways I'm not doing things, but some of which I am, and just overall, certainly the importance of doing that because you know, I was listening to a different podcast. I can't remember the exact words, but essentially, you know, the message was you have to be able to continue doing this work for many years into the future. And if you don't sustain yourself as part of doing that, then if you care that much about the work, then you care that much about yourself as well. And I think it would be lovely to, you know, for those that do want to stick around, spend more time here on thoughts, feelings in response to this presentation. But for the, you know, a couple folks that joined us a little bit later, we talked a little bit about just what we do as part of this group. And we do have a number of different gatherings that are some virtual, some in person, some are planned out, some are not. We have a bi-monthly, though, community meeting. So we may not always have a speaker, but we do intend to have space to gather and talk about things that are working in your world, in your farming endeavor, things that are not working. And we also hope to have a few more in-person gatherings. And maybe I'm not sure, Jeannie, if let me try to share my screen. Oh yeah, looks like I can. Some of you may have seen this graphic that Alyssa did. It's wonderful. It shows all of our different things happening. So the thing that I was starting to mention about in-person gatherings in McHenry County Grange Hall. So we're trying to get a few actual in-person gatherings a year because we believe in the importance of gathering in person as well as the importance of having virtual space to do that. So we'll announce some details about the one in June. We have these virtual bi-monthly membership meetings. And then we're hoping to have a field day in August. And our big event of the year that a lot of you have been at is our Farmily reunion. We will be planning that out and then ending the year with another bi-monthly membership meeting. So stay tuned. Don't hesitate to reach out, tell others to get on our listserv, follow us, and want to thank Laura so much for being here and sharing all that wisdom with us and experience and your story. And those that do want to stick around, just kind of opening up the floor to thoughts, questions, anything else.
I'm going to stop the recording. So, yeah.